Well, hello, beautiful people. Good to see you guys. My name is Troy. I'm one of the pastors here. If you are new with us, I normally do the music and stuff, and you may ask yourself, they let the music guy talk? On occasion, they let the music guy talk. It is such a privilege for me to get to share with you guys today. I love what we're talking about here. At the end of the day, we're talking about hope. We're always bringing hope because God is in the hope business. Jesus was a purveyor of hope, and today we're going to talk about hope. We just started a new series last week. Rob started us off with this new series, Necessary Endings and New Beginnings. And at the beginning of that, he said, sometimes there are things in our lives that need pruning. Sometimes they're wonderful things, they're functional things, they're even somewhat healthy things, or maybe they're unhealthy things. But we often have to prune away something that is good to make room for something that is better. And today, we're going to be talking about not just about necessary endings, but how to avoid unnecessary endings. How do you know when to keep hope alive? The big idea for the series is this, is that life has seasons. In order to thrive, we need to know how to embrace necessary endings and new beginnings. As Rob shared, our core scripture is from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, and I've kind of abbreviated a little bit to the part that's pertinent to what we're talking about here today. It goes like this: there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away. How do you know when to avoid an unnecessary ending in a relationship, in a business partnership? Maybe there's struggles, addictions, compulsions that you have in your world, in the world of someone that you love, and you wonder, am I staying in this relationship is contributing to the problem? Is it more loving for me to stay in it, or more loving for me to step out? How do I avoid an unnecessary ending? How do I know when to keep hope alive? Jesus shares with us in Matthew chapter 5. He says this: blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit, when there is poverty of spirit, when you finally realize that you have a need. You see, the gospel isn't for people who think they have their act together. The gospel is for people who know they don't have their act together, right? Because if you don't think you need saving, there's no need for a savior. If your cup is already full of you, there's no room for anybody else. If you already think you know everything, it's very difficult for you to be taught. And this is true in the macro story of our lives and in the micro story of our lives, that the God of the universe is willing to say, I am here for you. I want to offer something to you. I'm trying to give something to you, not keep something from you. And it's saying, if you will come to me in poorness of spirit, if you will recognize that you don't know it all, that you don't have it all together, that you do have a need, then the possibility for you to receive everything is there. The big idea for today is this: how do you know when to keep hope alive? Hope for change only comes from brokenness. Read, poor in spirit. Hope for change comes from brokenness, when we finally realize that we have a need. You may have someone in your life, a loved one, a spouse, a friend, a relative, a child, and you're wondering, do I keep hope alive? And you're wondering, how do I avoid an unnecessary ending? We live in a culture that is so disposable that we'll dispose of marriages, we'll dispose of partnerships, we'll dispose of friends, we'll dispose of people who don't make us happy, we'll dispose of all these other things, and we're wondering, you know what? Very often God is saying maybe hope can come alive if we will submit that situation, submit that person, if they will surrender themselves to Him. There's a possibility for restoration and for healing there. I'm gonna tell you a little story. I'm one of those people who is an old car person, right? I'm not talking like vintage car, like that would be cool, okay? I'm talking just old cars that really should be retired, right? And I'm hanging on. I have an 18-year-old car. My favorite make and model is a Toyota paid-for runner. Man, I'm going to drive this thing into the ground. It's going to disintegrate beneath me. I'm going to be Fred Flintstoning it around town. This is a wonderful car. And I love my car because I don't have car payments. I got cheap insurance, right? I love my car. Now, apparently, my children aren't as enamored with my car as I am. I was dropping my kids off at the loop at their school, and my youngest, I just noticed we would get there and he would just bolt. He would just take off as soon as I pull up. And I thought maybe he's got a problem with his brother or something, you know? And so I asked him a couple days later, I say, hey buddy, how come when I drop you off at school, how come you just take off so quickly, you leave everyone behind? And he goes, Dad, your car is so old. I'm like, fly that flag proud and high. Your dad doesn't have a car payment, but he doesn't want to be known as the old car family, all right? So I guess we've got some work to do in that arena. Now here's the cool thing, like, about having an old car is I don't really care so much if there's a ding or a scratch or a bump or something. It really doesn't bother me. The downside of having an old car is I don't really care if there's a ding or a scratch or a bump or something on my car. And a couple of years ago, I'm driving along on the freeway, and a truck, you know those trucks that, like, they put those little lame pieces of canvas over the top supposed to keep stuff coming out of the truck, and it never works, right? I was behind one of those. And I kicked a rock up, and it just, like a gunshot, it dinged the passenger side of my windshield. And so there's a little star there and this little minor crack. I'm driving along, it's like, oh, what a bummer. And I'm like, oh, well. It's not bothering me any, you know? And so now the problem with that is, and I don't know if it's been 2 or 3 years, it's been there for a while, so you go through a couple of winters, a couple of summers, and there's this crack that's been creeping its way across the windshield. It's getting into my peripheral vision. Now, this has been pointed out to me by a number of passengers in the car. And they're telling me, hey, Troy, you want to get that fixed? I'm like, nope. I'm not going to pay $200. This car isn't worth $200. No, I'm fine with it. Now, the passengers, they're a little concerned somehow for me. See, because they're looking into the future. And they're seeing there's a time coming when this thing is all the way in my vision. And I'm the guy who's looking above and beneath it, trying to figure out how to see along the road. And if I let that go long enough, it's going to become a serious problem, right? Something's going to happen. That windshield's going to break. I'm going to wind up with glass on my lap, and I'm still going to ignore the problem. I'm going to be driving around, tears in my eyes from the wind. Isn't it great to have the wind in your hair? The trash is swirling around the back of the car. And it's just like, now we laugh, but tell you what, no one I love wants to ride with me in that situation. And these people have been warning me, Troy, if you don't take care of that crack, it's going to become a problem. If you don't take care of that crack, eventually it's going to obscure your vision. If you don't take care of this problem, we can extrapolate out to the future what's going to happen, and your vision's going to get so obscured, you're going to wind up in a ditch. Is that for me? Lord? I'm going to wind up in a ditch. If I don't take care of business, right? There are going to be ambulances, and there are going to be sirens, and there are going to be tow trucks, and they're going to be pulling me out of a ditch, and the people that I love are going to have to take care of me because I didn't take care of me. You feel me? We can look into the future. You may have a friend, a coworker, a loved one, a work situation. It could be your marriage, and you're saying, hey, I see the crack in the windshield, and it's creeping across the glass, and if you don't do something about this, you are going to wind up in the ditch. You're going to wind up with paramedics and with ambulances surrounding you because you refuse to acknowledge and you continue to drive down the road pretending like there isn't a problem. I've done it. You've done it. You probably have someone you care about who's done that. Now, how do you know if staying in that relationship isn't just perpetuating the problem or if it's time for you to step out? And we're going to talk about a diagnostic tool to give you here today that is going to help you evaluate whether or not you can keep hope alive. Now, Henry Cloud wrote in his book, Necessary Endings, which this whole series is based on. Henry Cloud's book, Necessary Endings. Write that down if you need to get a hold of it, because he's going to explain this stuff a lot better than I'm going to explain it to you here today. Rob introduced us to this book last week, and we're going to continue on for the next several weeks unpacking what Henry Cloud, and he's a wonderful counselor, marriage and family counselor, has explained to us through this book, Necessary Endings. So, we're going to give you a diagnostic tool. It's going to be 7 points. It sounds like a lot, okay? But I want you to fill in the fill-ins. I want you to take this tool home so that you can refer to it later. And if you really want to do well, go and purchase that book. And he's got it all outlined in a chapter on unnecessary endings. Well, first of all, we want to establish a couple of rules. Rule number 1, as you're thinking about the future of a relationship, a work situation, anything like that, the predictor of the future is the past. What has typically happened is typically what is going to happen, right? That's the number 1. So you want to know what the future is going to look like? You typically look at the past. Now, rule number 2, it doesn't have to be that way. Rule number 2 says that there's hope for change, that pattern can be broken if we will align ourselves with the way God does things. If we will align ourselves and submit ourselves to Him, there can be hope for change, that the future doesn't have to be just the way the past has always been. Now, I had a bit of a wake-up call several years ago. We moved out here from California 12 years ago. I've been in Kansas City. 12 years, right? No, stop, don't, really. You shouldn't. No, quit it. Quit it. 12 years ago, we moved out here from California. Now, to kind of take care of my, physical fitness and whatever, I used to surf. And sure enough, God moves us to the exact center of the country. I can't get further from a body of water. And I'm a little bitter about it, okay? So I come here and we immediately start a new job. We don't know anybody. We don't really have any friends. Our kids got sick right like on my first day of work. They were in the hospital. We had all kinds of stress with the church and things that were happening. It was really a big deal. And I kind of let things slide. It's like I was busy, I was stressed, everything was new. I wasn't really doing anything. I couldn't surf anymore. So, and I wasn't a very good surfer to start with, just for the record. But it was fun, and it was cathartic, and it was kind of something that I could do to take care of my body. Well, I got here, all the stress and just kind of being sedentary and eating poorly and all that. After a few years, I wound up in the hospital. And this was kind of like a lightning strike for me. I'm laying on my back, and I'm looking at my wife and my kids, concerned faces, standing next to the bed looking at me. And my boys are like 4 and 5 years old, right? Just little buddies. And I have a vision of the future, looking at my family and going, you know what? If I don't take responsibility for my health, they're going to have to take responsibility for my health. And I'm going to wind up in the ditch. That crack is going to creep across my eyesight, and things are going to come undone. And it was just clear as day as I'm looking at those guys going, something's got to change, and I'm the one who's got to change. So got released from the hospital after a little surgery, and doctor released me to work out. After about a month, I couldn't pick up 15 pounds, and I started to do something. Anybody remember P90X? Wow. All right, a lot of you apparently like Tony Horton. Okay, there's this 90-day program with this really goofy, funny trainer guy, and you would work out 6 days a week, with these DVDs, and you had to buy minimal equipment. And so I got a hold of that program and said, all right, we're making a change. So I set my alarm. I got up at 5:30 in the morning, because if it was going to happen, it was going to happen before the kids got up. And I did P90X. It's a 90-day program. I did it for 450 days. Because I was really needed help. And I pushed through that, did it, and then kind of got sick of it, started doing some other things. My beautiful wife started to help. We would use the P90X diet program, and so we started eating differently. We started doing things differently, and over time, I started to see some change. Over time, I started to, feel better. I started to act better. I started to have more energy. I was maybe a better version of me for the people that I love. And I kind of got tired of that, did some other things. Now I've been doing something called CrossFit, and it's been really a wonderful thing. But here's the reason I tell you that is this. I assure you, I am as lazy and undisciplined as anyone in this room. But when lightning strikes, when you hit the wall, when you get that vision of the future, when you see that the crack is going to blow up the glass in your face, you're going to be driving around with glass in your lap, and no one is going to run a ride in the car with you, you have that realization it's time for a change. You want to step out and you want to do something. And that's what it was for me, right? For you, it might be something else. You might be dealing with an addiction. You might be dealing with credit cards, a financial habit. You might be dealing with chaos in the workplace. It might be some other kind of compulsion. And I'm just here to tell you that as we submit ourselves to God and we come before him and we get a vision of the train wreck of a future that we could have unless we reorient our lives in the direction of necessary change. And for you, if you love somebody who's in that situation, you love somebody that you're looking at them and their life is coming apart, you see the ditch coming. And you would say you can berate them and you can nag them and you can push them and you can do everything you want to try and encourage them to do it. But until they start making some shifts, there's not much reason for you to hold out for hope. Now, I'm going to give you 7 tools that we're going to examine here. And as we look at these 7 different things, if you see these evidenced in the life of this loved one, in the life of this relationship, this business situation, then you really have a reason to think that you can avoid an unnecessary ending. And if you don't see these things, there's probably not a lot of hope to be had. So the first thing we want to see here is this. We want to see them admit their need. You want to see them admit their need. Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poverty of spirit says, I have a need. Poverty of spirit says that I am broken over the situation. Poverty of spirit says that I can admit my need. And if an individual can acknowledge their need, there is hope. And if they don't, there isn't much. See, we need to hear somebody say, I know I can't do it on my own. I know I've got a problem. And if they have that kind of admission of need, there is indeed hope. There is indeed a possibility that things can be healed and made better. See, brokenness says, I need. But until you have an admission, there's not much reason to hold out for hope. Next, you want to see them involved in a proven change process. A proven change process. Please don't tell me you're going to get better. Don't tell me you're going to have your drinking buddies as your accountability. Don't tell me you're going to start taking vitamins to be healthy. Don't tell me you're going to do all these things. We want to see you engaged in a proven change process. If you're talking about, it was like your fitness. Okay, maybe it's P90X or CrossFit or Orange Theory or something like that. Or perhaps if you have an addiction, something serious, we want to get involved in a 12-step program, something that is proven to see life change in the right direction. And if you're not willing to do that, there's not much reason to hold out for hope. And none of us makes those kind of changes purely on willpower. None of us is that strong. But if we will engage in a proven process, and we will add this to it, vulnerability and accountability in community is critical. That's one of the reasons why these 12-step programs are so powerful, because you enter into a community of people who struggle with the same thing, and the possibility for you to actually be vulnerable, to actually be transparent about what's going on in your life without judgment is an enormously powerful tool to help you move in the direction of change. Next, you want to see change in your life rhythm. Change in the life rhythm. So if we're talking about an addict, right, you want to see 90 meetings in 90 days. If you're talking about somebody who needs to get their physical act together, well, maybe you want to see them set their alarm up at 5:30 in the morning to get out, to get on the road, to get to the gym, to meet those other workout buddies. I mean, I want to see a budget, and I want to see a shopping list, right? If you're talking about a marriage counselor, you want to see your schedule change in order to make those counseling appointments. You want to see the schedule shift. You want to see the rhythm of the life move in the direction of the change. And the point is this, okay? If they just say they're going to get involved in a recovery group or a fitness program, but they don't comply with it, they don't show up, we don't have much reason to hold out for hope. I have hope when you show up. When we have that marriage counseling appointment and you show up, I have hope. If you don't show up, I don't have hope. If you show up to the recovery meeting, I have hope. If you don't, I don't have hope. If you show up for the workout, I have hope. If you don't, I don't have hope. If you show up for Financial Peace University because you're in terrifying debt, I have hope. If you don't show up, I don't have hope. Next, we want to see the introduction of new wisdom. The introduction of new wisdom. If there's nothing new brought to the process, there's not some new kind of understanding, we're probably just going to keep circling the airport. We're going to keep doing what we've always done. See, brokenness, poverty of spirit will reveal itself in teachability. It will reveal itself in teachability. The book of Proverbs says this, whoever corrects a mocker invites insults, but whoever rebukes the wicked incurs abuse. Do not rebuke mockers, or they will hate you. Rebuke the wise, and they will love you. Instruct the wise, and they will be wiser still. Teach the righteous, and they will add to their learning. Brokenness will reveal itself in teachability. I had this buddy of mine who had let his health go for far too long, and periodically he would go on some kind of like a fast. It's like, I'm going to fast for X amount of time, and he would do it, and he would actually start to feel better. He'd get more energy. He'd be thinking more clearly. He would, lose whatever amount of weight. But then that diet, by definition, is temporary. You can't do that all the time. See, he didn't need a diet. He didn't need a fast. What he needed is a new normal. What he needed was an injection of new wisdom into the system. And if he keeps doing things the way he had always done them, he's going to keep getting the same results. You and I have all done that, right? You keep trying that cheesecake diet, you wonder why it ain't working. It's time for a new plan. It's time for some new wisdom to get into the system. Maybe what he really needs is to go to a doctor who's got a track record of helping people with that kind of health problem and reorient his rhythm of life into a new normal. We want to see the injection of new wisdom. Why? Because if you do what you have always done, you will get what you have always gotten. Next, you want to see them learning new skills through new experiences. You want to see them learning new skills through new experiences. There's this wonderful researcher, his name is John Gottman, and he's got this team that has done research on marriages. There's thousands of couples they've observed in interactions, and what they've gotten to do is they can watch a couple interact over just about anything. They can talk about finances, they can talk about their marriage, they can talk about macrame. It doesn't matter. They can watch these guys interact, and they can tell you with a 92% certainty if that marriage will survive the next 7 years. And they'll tell you after observing thousands of couples that there are 4 markers that they look for in that interaction. And if they see these markers in that interaction, they'll tell you there's not a lot of hope unless things change significantly. 1, they'll say this, if there's a kind of defensiveness, in the posture towards one another, that is not a good sign. If they reveal contempt for one another, that's a very bad sign. If they have something called unplugging, which is that rolling your eyes and disengaging and, whatever, that kind of attitude, that means they're unplugging. They're not willing to fight for engagement in the relationship. And next, if there's a kind of global criticism, if there's this skeptical posture towards the other person, they'll say there's not a lot of hope that relationship can survive. But you put that same couple in a workshop on communication, and they learn how to communicate when they're afraid. They learn how to communicate without defensiveness. They learn that you can have hope when God's ways get into the picture. It doesn't have to go south. It doesn't have to come apart. You don't have to have an unnecessary ending if you're willing to learn new skills and new experiences. If there's brokenness, if there's poverty of spirit, there is hope. Next, you want to see them own the process. You want to see them own the process. You can't want change for them. You can't do it for them. You can't go to therapy for them. You can't read the book for them. You can't do this for them. They have got to take the initiative. They have got to take ownership of it for themselves. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled," right? Because you don't have to tell a hungry person to eat. They're going to go ahead and eat. If they're hungry for change, if they're hungry for new wisdom, if they're hungry to reorient their lives in the right direction, you don't have to talk them into that. They're going to own that for themselves. And you can nag them and berate them and go after them. But if you do that, right, if you try and do for them what they need to do for themselves, you actually set the process backwards. You actually lose ground. What we need them to do is to own it for themselves. And sometimes what that means for us is we state our case, we support them, we're there for them, but then we let them enjoy the consequences of their decisions. This is great, like with kids, okay? Kids will respond very, very openly and easily. So you say, okay, son, if you do your chores, if you do all the stuff I'm asking you to do, you get to go to Disneyland, okay? If you don't do what I'm asking you to do, I'm going to Disneyland. And you're going to babysitter hell, right? Remember that Nanny McPhee babysitter that you were so scared of, right? She's available, and I'm going to send you to her, right? But I'm going to Disneyland. See, there's our natural consequences. We can't do it for them. They have to own it for themselves. They have to make the change themselves. And a person who is hungry for change, they wouldn't think of missing their AA meeting. They wouldn't think of missing their counseling appointment. They wouldn't think of missing that workout at 6 a.m. because they are hungry for a change. They are hungry for righteousness. And when you have that kind of hunger, you will be filled. And I can't do this for you. You, the supportive person. I can support you. I will cheer for you. I will be there for you. I will be consistently loving to you, but I can't do it for you. And I am going to pray for you. In the book of James, he says that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. And we want to be that kind of person for the people that we love, for those people that we see headed for the ditch, that have the crack creeping across their windshield. Now, as I was talking with the person who is the head of our counseling department here at Westside, her name is Connie, and she's really wise and really wonderful. And she was sharing this with me, and I thought you guys would appreciate this. There are circles of responsibility. We have 3 circles of responsibility here. There is mine, right? Me, the supportive person. You, the person who is in need of support. And then God's circle of responsibility. So for me, my responsibility is to pray for you, to love you. I will be consistently there for you. I'm not going to enable you, but I am going to love you and be kind towards you, and I'll surround you with that kind of support. Your responsibility is to take the initiative. Your responsibility, the person needing the change, is to own the responsibility. And God's responsibility is this, that he brings strength, that he brings those supernatural circumstances and relationships to us. That he brings restoration and healing, those kind of things that only he can do. And when we all own our own circles of responsibility, that is a trifecta of hope. There is possibility for significant change. There's possibility to avoid an unnecessary ending. But we shortchange that process when we switch the responsibilities. When I try to do for you what you should do for you, when I berate you and I read the book and I throw the book on the coffee table and here, there's your solution, right? When I try to berate you into the workout, right? If I try to do the things for you that you should be doing for you, we go backwards. And what's worse is when we try to take the responsibility that is God's, we really go backwards. Odds are that's what got us into the situation in the first place, is we were trying to be God and we didn't let God be God. But if we will own our own responsibility, there's truly hope to be had. And lastly, you want to see progress over time. You want to see progress over time. I have a buddy of mine who, it's that same guy I was talking about. He just had a number of compulsions, and he's just dealing with eating issues and compulsion issues and different kinds of addictions. And I said, well, what's your game plan for how to deal with this stuff? Because it's significant. And he goes, well, a really good friend of mine is a counselor. And so I'm using him and this other guy, they're sort of my accountability. They're my counselor. They live kind of far away, so I don't get to see him all that often. But, we get on the phone, we talk about it. I'm like, okay, well, cool. A couple years later, ask him again, well, how is this going? How's that plan working out? I still kind of in the same place. I still have the same compulsion. I still have the same eating issue. I've still got this. And I got to ask myself, okay, bro, 2 years, man. I got to ask, are you compliant with your buddy's counsel? Or is having one of your buddies be your accountability and your counsel really a good idea? Because you're going to see some kind of movement. You're going to see some kind of change in their life. Even if it's a step backwards, very often it takes a step backwards before we move forward. But after that kind of time, it's not going to stay in the same place. You're going to see some kind of change. And if you don't, either one, you're not being compliant with the program, or 2, you need a new program. But you're going to see some kind of change. You want to see some kind of progress over time. It's like that person that says, hey, I'm going to do CrossFit for 4 days a week, and I'm going to eat paleo, I'm going to do all this stuff, and a year later, they're exactly the same. I got to ask, did you show up? Because if you showed up and you did the thing, there's no way you're going to be exactly the way you were a year ago. It's that way with your physical health. It's that way with our emotional health. It's that way in our relationships. They're not going to stay in the same place. And it doesn't mean it's perfect, but it does mean there will be movement. Proverbs 13 says this, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And friends, our God is a God of hope. He is a God of healing. He is a God who will always meet you in your need. If you take a step towards him, he's going to take a step towards you. If you come to him and say, God, I need. If you come to him and say, God, I'm poor in spirit. If you come to God and you say, I don't know how to do this, so my eyes are on you. God will always meet you in that need. He will always bring you the hope that you're hungry for. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are you when you realize you're not really bringing much of anything to the table, because that's when the possibility of you being filled with everything that he would have for you is present. There is hope in brokenness. There is hope in teachability. And there is no shame in admitting your need. There never has been, there never will be. And if someone says otherwise, it's a lie from the enemy. The enemy wants to keep you in the same place. The enemy wants to keep you broken and stuck. The enemy wants to see you circling in the airport in your addiction, in your compulsion, in your ethical issue, in your financial pressure. The enemy wants to see you stay right where you are because he renders you helpless. But if we will submit that to the Savior and admit we need a Savior and admit that we need hope, we need help, God will always meet you there. Let's pray. So Jesus, we come to you right now, admitting our need from wherever we're at. There's no one in this room who doesn't need you. There's no one in this room who doesn't need to be broken. There's no one here who doesn't need to admit we can't save ourselves. And as we look at those people in our lives that are broken, those people in our lives that are headed for the ditch and they refuse to admit that there was a problem, God, we ask that you intersect in that situation. We ask that you draw them to yourself. We ask that you bring brokenness that will bring about change. And you help us as the people who love them to speak with wisdom and the leading of your Spirit, that you would be glorified and that they would be healed. We submit all this to you, Jesus, in your great name. Amen. We have prayer partners available for you. If you want to pray with somebody, talk to somebody, they will be down front. God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.